Good evening. Welcome. My name is Michelle Young, and I'm the Director of the Sports Initiatives and Student Engagement here at Wharton. The Sports Business Initiative, along with the Center for Africana Studies, welcomes you to our last program of the semester, the Race and Sports Lecture. The annual event, scheduled in conjunction with the Penn Relays, was established in 2002 as a forum for informed discussions with prominent athletes, sports scholars, and journalists. This event has offered a forum for a wide range of participants, including Tina Sloan Green, Kellen Winslow, Todd Boyd, Harry Edwards, Stephen A. Smith, Tommy Smith, Marion Jones, Katrina Adams, a panel discussion between Preston Brown, John Carlos, Anita DeFrance, Sonny Vaccaro, and most recently, Colin D. Williams Jr. and Ken Shropshire, authors of The Miseducation of the Student Athletes, How to Fix College Sports. We are thrilled to have Michael Bennett join us for tonight's event. We'll begin tonight with a discussion led by Dr. Camille Charles, followed by a question and answer period. Dr. Charles is the Walter H. and Leonore C. Annenberg Professor in the Social Sciences, Professor of Sociology, Africana Studies, and Education, Director of the Center for Africana Studies, and Co-Faculty Director of Penn First Plus here at Penn. Dr. Charles's research, interests, and expertise are in the areas of racial inequality and elite higher education, including the diverse origins and experiences of Blacks at elite colleges and universities, racial residential segregation, racial attitudes and intergroup relations, and racial identity. She is the author of Won't You Be My Neighbor, Race, Class, and Residence in Los Angeles, and co-author of The Source of the River, The Social Origins of Freshmen at American Selective Colleges and Universities, and Taming the River, Negotiating the Academic, Financial, and Social Currents in Selective Colleges and Universities. Please welcome Dr. Charles and our guest Michael Bennett for the discussion tonight.
Thank you. So I am pleased to introduce Michael Bennett, standout defensive lineman in the NFL, with stints with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Seattle Seahawks, Carolina Panthers, Philadelphia Eagles, and now player with
No Carolina Panthers.
No
We
Carolina
hate the
Panthers.
Panthers. They suck.
It's against the Carolina
They never
Panthers.
won. No,
I'm
no.
sorry.
Yeah.
And currently with the New England Patriots. In addition to his football prowess, he is quite the philanthropist and activist. In partnership with his wife, Pele, who's here this evening, he established the Bennett Foundation, an initiative that educates underserved children and communities through free, accessible programming in Hawaii, Washington, Texas, and now globally. The foundation's Ocean Health Fest impacts thousands of people each year by offering free health screenings, fitness activities, cooking demonstrations, and much more. The Bennett Foundation empowers parents and provides children with tools to lead healthier lives. This past season, Michael wrote the New York Times best-selling book, Things That Make White People Uncomfortable. And he also visited Senegal, where he sponsors 100 African girls through his partnership with #IamTheCode. This trip was particularly significant for Michael as he learned through AfricanAncestry.com earlier in the year that he is Senegalese, making the trip a spiritual and eye-opening experience for him. Please join me in welcoming Michael Bennett.
That was good. Oh, yeah, we need the microphone.
This one.
Let's take this down. The Panthers.
I'm sorry, I read the long bio
I'm
wrong,
joking
so
with you.
I should have looked at the long bio because it gets confusing. All right, so as we get into the conversation, I feel like this is not on or something. Is it not on or not up loud enough? Oh, okay. Could you give us the sort of Reader's Digest version of how you got to here, in terms of what is it about your upbringing, your educational experiences that got you to the point where as an NFL player, you also decided to be an activist.
I wouldn't. I mean, I don't know if I would consider myself more like humanitarian. I just like.
Okay.
I mean, I guess an activist is a term too, but I just feel like it's more about humanity and figuring out how do I play a role in it? How does my wife play a role in it? And how can we make change through our foundation and the things that are happening around us? And I think now is just the timing and everything's at a climax is happening with Colin taking the knee and everything that was happening in America, transition from Obama to Trump, like the things that we were saying had a voice to them. It had something people were paying attention to. It had been a while before people were listening to athletes, before LeBron James and Chris Paul and Dwayne Wade and Carmelo Anthony sat on the stage and they talked about gun violence. No, people weren't really talking about those things for a while. We missed that missing link between, John Carlos and all those guys, Carlos Howard. And then Michael Jordan didn't say anything. Kobe Bryant didn't really have a voice. And then all of a sudden, everything was happening in America with race and Trayvon Martin and all these different things that were happening. And Black Lives Matter. So it was like everything was happening at once. And I think our voices got amplified with the movement that was happening around us. And I think, nobody thought that our voices would have this impact that it had. It just so happened that people were listening and people were ready for a change and people were ready for athletes to use their voices and use their platforms for something different than just, selling items to them. And how can we stay connected to the communities that we came in and make sure that, we are a picture of them and we still are a part of those communities. And I think all of that happened. And that's why I end up being in this spot, because before we were talking in 2013 about things and nobody was really listening. And in 2014, we were saying different things, having discussions, but nobody was really listening. And all of a sudden, everything just happened at once.
Okay.
Michael, we can't hear you over here, buddy.
Okay. I'll yell to you.
It's got to be
Okay.
Okay.
more volume.
Okay, I got you.
So, in reading some of my materials, I saw that there were actually concerns about your draftability because you were vocal.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit, I think especially now with transitioning to the Patriots, a team that has a particular perception around speaking out and and humanitarianism or activism,
So
or
it's connected,
even
yeah,
just
yeah.
sort of,
Yeah, I think when you are in the system, as my wife would say, football is like the military. And we had this long discussion on the plane. I was like, no, it's not. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, maybe it is a little bit like it. And I think there's jobs that have like certain guidelines to how they want people to act, and people have money and things that they want to obtain. And I think when you speak out in sports and there's so much money involved, there's so many things that are happening around us that they don't want you to have that voice. They don't want you to be able to speak up about that thing, because your number one focus is winning the game. It's not your humanity. It's not your humanity. It's not the people in your community. It's not things that are happening around you. It's about winning. How can I score this touchdown? How can I make the school more money? And I think while you're in college and you start to be vocal about those things, that scares them, because they can only think that if you don't have any money and you have a voice, just imagine how, if you get money, how big your voice would be. So I think a lot of times teams get scared of that that's always a check mark. Is this guy vocal? And I think they mix vocal with not being coachable. If you ask questions, if you're saying this and you're doing that, they consider you not being coachable. And I think that's a big demerit on your check thing whenever they do it for the NFL. So I think if you have a voice and you're searching for that thing, because everybody, when you go to college, it's like the first time you like really digging deep into your own identity. You're part of high school and you got all these new friends that you're friends with. You grew up in this neighborhood, and all of a sudden you put into this society these things that you don't understand, this different culture. And I think me being in Texas A&M was definitely a culture shock. I think if you, you got me. I feel like Jay-Z. No, I definitely feel like when you are. If you in that system and you trying to learn who you are, there's going to be some culture shocks for you and some culture shocks for the coaches. And in my book, I talked about that. A lot of time white coaches, they want to be your father. And I'm like, I got a daddy, and my dad's a good dad. He's at the house right now. He's probably going to be at practice later. And so a lot of times they don't understand that when you are there, you just want to play the sport. You're not looking for a father. And if you are looking for a mentor, you will ask him a question. But it's not for him to try to change everything culturally about you. I think that happens a lot in sports, especially when you're dealing with big college sports and big teams who make a lot of money. And you talk about SEC, Big 12, that type of play. And other colleges might not have that, but when you're in that type of world, they want to control everything about you. So,
So is it, I think on the outside, a lot of people might have the sense that, you know, some teams are more open to the individuality of players, let's put it that way, instead
Yeah.
of talking about activism, but just sort of the individuality of players than other teams are. Is that a myth?
no, I think that's true. I think there's teams that people have bigger voices because the coaches allow the people to have bigger voices. I wouldn't say allow, but I guess kind of what it is. Really, they're allowing you to be yourself, allowing you to be the voice that you want to be. And then there are other teams who push the team first, and which is fine if you're pushing the team first, but you can't take away a person's voice about things that matter to them. And I think, you know, it's up to the players. It's up to how do the players, you know, every time you talk to college athletes, it's about the athlete having power and them not realizing their power, you know. I told Roger Goodell, I'm like, you don't sell the jersey. You can put a jersey out that says Philadelphia Eagles and it probably won't sell, but if you put Wentz on back of it, Dawkins, that's where the money comes from. So it's like the players have a voice, and I think some teams don't realize that, and a lot of guys don't realize that they have a voice. So now it's a lot of young players that are coming in the league. They got a lot of good leadership with Malcolm Jenkins and other guys with the Player Coalition who are, you know, making the voices, making guys be able to have these voices. So the teams have got to start listening, and then they're doing a good job now because now they have a line of communication, and before there was no communication between the player and the organization about, you know, having a voice and being connected to their communities.
What about growing up on a farm has impacted just sort of your worldview, your work ethic, but also your relationships with family, and how do those things carry over for you in your personal and professional life as an adult?
I think, because I grew up in Texas, but the summer times I would go to my grandpa. Both of my grandpas have farms, and we had to work on them and do all. As a matter of fact, I should send him a statement because he owes me some money for all the work that we did in the summertime. But, you know, we all would be on the thing. It was like these two different worlds. Like being in Texas, everything was fast and everything was, you know, sports and everything was hanging out and just being in the streets. But then like being in Louisiana was like, you know, the home side of it, building work ethic. And as I look back, a lot of stuff that I feel like for work ethic, you know, I really feel like it came from my grandfather as far as like, you know, seeing somebody work really hard and you know, having you doing things that you wouldn't really do, making you wake up early. And I think the farm and being there with my family, my young cousins I still remember those moments, you know. I think for me, that family part of it is my whole structure. Like, how do you have a family and have success and still keep your family the same? It's hard though. It's hard because a lot of times people, you know, when you reach a certain amount of success, they think that your family, your connection to the family comes with, you know, a money line too. But it's like, no, it's just me. Just imagine me without any success and just still being the same kid that you grew up with. And I think, you know, being in Louisiana a lot of the times in my summer, I think it really helped mold me as a person. And it helped me in football, it helped me in a lot of different things because I seen how hard people work and I seen the difference of lifestyle and from, you know, having something and not having anything, people living in trailers and doing different, you know, ways of life. And I think for me that gave me more of a well-rounded view of the world. And I think going back and transitioning was always hard. Or coming back to Louisiana it was like every time I came to Louisiana they'd be like, "They go to that city slicker right there." But then I go back, they'd be like, "Oh, look at that country boy." I'm like, where do I fit in right now? And so I just felt like being in that moment and being in Louisiana, I think it really molded me as a person. And I'm really thankful for the opportunities because Louisiana, like in my family, is like, it's the beginning of everything. If you look at my family on both sides, my mother and my father, we back to the 1700s. It's not like a new like thing. It's like that's where my family's been for a long period of time. Me and my wife took my kids. We were looking at graves that says 1769. Like, you know, so it's like there's a long history of my family in that part of that town on both sides because the road is called Bennett Road. Another road is called Leathers Road, and that's both of my family. So it's like a long history. So being there, I got a lot of time to learn a lot of stuff about history and just about work ethic personally.
So I want to talk about your book. Could you talk about why you called the book things that make white people uncomfortable. I think it's great, but I think it's
No, it's funny though, because like it was so many different titles, and at first I told the publisher, it's like, yeah, this is what I'm thinking. And he was like, what? I don't know if that's gonna, it's gonna ruffle some feathers. And I was like, that's what the whole book is about. It's about ruffling feathers and making people uncomfortable. I think in society we've been so comfortable with things that have been happening around us. We look at the world and we see murder, or we see, inequality, we see all these police brutality, we see all these things, and we start to become comfortable with them because we just become numb to the things, the way that things are. We're living in a state of crisis. We become, we become reactive and not proactive. And it's like around that, it's like, how do we break down that comfort level? And it starts with us being uncomfortable. So I felt like, making that title, it was an eye-opening title, and being uncomfortable is what the whole book is about. It's about undressing our comfortability, undressing our armor, our vulnerability, everything, undressing all of that, where we could just be seen in the street as just human beings on that level. And I think that's really what the book was about. It was about undressing the, football as what people see it for, as they see just the player, but it was about undressing that and letting you see me as a human being, seeing the humanity behind the helmet. I think this college sports was the same thing. I think wanted to break down like what it is like to be a college athlete, but also what happens to the psyche when you become a college athlete and you don't reach your potential, you don't reach your goal, and everybody in your family is depending on you. You have this extra line. Most college kids go to college and they just go into college and they're having fun, but when you have your whole family in your back, that's a lot of pressure for a young person to have, and it creates this sense of PTSD, and we talk about that in the book. And if you look at a lot of players, they're dealing with this post-traumatic distress disorder, and they don't know how to deal with it. They don't know what to do with it. They have violence. They're dealing with all these head traumas. They're dealing with injuries. They're dealing with all kinds of things that people don't really understand, and nobody really uses that D word in sports, depression. There's a lot of players who are dealing with depression from not reaching their potential. Some of these kids, coaches don't know how to connect with somebody that's, 19 with a child. They looking at a child, but this child has a child. So this child has other obligations that they can't really deal with, and a lot of coaches don't want to deal with that. They don't want to do that, and that's really what a lot of the chapter is about. It's just about the humanity, about life and sports and intersectionality, the things about women, just everything about how to, as a man and a person, to deal with society now, and giving young athletes the courage to have a voice, the young athletes to have a voice and not be scared to say what they want to say, not be scared of what somebody's going to judge them. Don't be scared of the criticism that comes along with having a voice. At some point, you being silent is just, you're being dishonest. You just got to have that voice and really reach your goals and just share it with the world. And that's what my book is about. And I think when I talk to young people and I talk to young kids and I see kids and the first thing they ask me is about the book, they don't really ask me about sports anymore. They want to ask questions about the book and ask about how to maneuver through society in the lane that they're in. And I'm happy to be able to help them because I lived in that arena, and I'm still trying to figure out, how to just keep bringing people along.
in the foreword, your brother Martellus talks about the lack of superheroes for underserved communities. What does a superhero look like for you? If you had to create one or some, what would they look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, like every time I look at that forward and I read it, it usually brings tears to my eyes because there's so much passion that my brother is expressing about me, but just an expression about his way to be able to use humor and bring in, realities of the world. And I think if you do look at a lot of communities in underserved areas, it's usually white people coming to save us from our lack of access, white people coming to save us from the violence in our community, white people coming to save us, and there's really no black heroes. If you look at, even in books, we have daughters, we're trying to show them heroes, like, oh, let me find one. There's Wonder Woman. Okay, no, not Wonder Woman. Oh, it's Captain Marvel. It's like there's nobody that looks like them that's in the thing. And even Storm, they starting to lighten her up. She used to be dark. She's an African queen. Now they Storm, I can't even tell who Storm is anymore. But, and for me, like having my brother, equate what do athletes do to community. Athletes are the heroes in a lot of the communities. Athletes, if you go to a lot of communities, you ask people what they want to be, they're going to say, oh, I want to be a basketball player, I want to be a football player, which is it's not a good thing, but at the same time, it's still something that they're striving to. And they look at us as the voice of their communities. They look at us as them, and they see us as we go through our cycles in life, and they live through us vicariously. They live through our injuries. They live through our success, live through our downfalls. And I think, not having, people to look up to in your community is hard. So when they look at us as athletes, it's a big responsibility too. You know what I'm saying? Because when people look at you as an athlete, when they look at you as a superhero, they're looking for you to, not be flawed. And sometimes people get let down when they find out you got some flaws, but you're still a human being. But at the same time, it's a big responsibility to live that straight and narrow path and try to make sure that you can always build up in your community. But for me, I think superheroes is there's no physical appearance that I think that a superhero has. I just think it's like the values of the superhero. Does that superhero have compassion? Does that superhero have courage? Does that superhero have vulnerability? And I think it doesn't. And I guess it could be me with some dreads. That would be kind of cool. Now that I think about it, yeah, I look like a superhero. I am a superhero. So yeah, I would think a superhero would look like me. Okay. No, I'm just joking. Now, I don't really know exactly what the superhero I have to draw him up or something.
Okay. So you talk a lot about an intersectional approach. Why do you believe that intersectionality is so key, and what is it like having that conversation with other players?
I think for me, reading Andrew Davis, Freedom is a Constant Struggle, and learning about intersectionality from other people, and just learning that it just kind of gives you and my wife being Polynesian and my friends being of different ethnicity, it just kind of gives you that, it gave me the ability to realize that it's not just about me and not just about one idea of what's happened to one community. It's about the whole world and how we're connected together as one race and one humanity, and how can, one person's injustice, injustice to somebody is injustice over there is a just injustice to me, or whatever happened in the Hispanic community is a problem with me, because who knows if my daughter is going to be a part of that community. It's just about us being humans, and I think for me it's just about that connection. So talking to some people about that, I think too, also speaking on that too, it's like also when you start to talk about intersectionality, it kind of opens up your mind too to things that you were uncomfortable with too, breaking down your barriers too, and I think that's a good thing about intersectionality. It breaks down your own barriers too, the things that you thought were just important, and you find out dang, that's if I'm saying that this is okay, then this has to be okay too. And it's like that whole line of that. And I think having that connection and talking to a lot of players about that, I think they don't really want to talk about those things because it's just that's too much information. And I think it is a lot of information to have that, that burden of connecting all people together, thinking that when you're in Africa and you're sitting there, if somebody doesn't have water and that's your issue, or, everything is just a big window. When you open that window up, it's just all the air starts to come in about the whole world, and it's just sometimes it can be overwhelming, but it's a great thing to understand the common thing that we all are is just human beings, and it's just how do we constantly keep pushing that agenda and sharing that message.
So what is one thing as it relates to activism and political engagement that our audience would be surprised to hear about as it relates to an NFL locker room? What does the media get wrong?
I think the media gets a lot of stuff wrong with it. I think they get all of it wrong because it's all perception. I think they all perceive the athletes exactly the same. They only see us as in the helmet. They only see us dunking the ball or hitting the ball. So it's they don't really get to know us on a human level. And I think there's a lot of guys who are connected and doing so many different things that, it's crazy. If one guy has a domestic abuse, the whole media will attack that one thing and just shine a light on that one thing, but they won't shine a light on all the guys who are, trying to be proactive in stopping that, or somebody who's doing stuff to stopping the school to prison pipeline, just, bailouts, bail reform. It's the first time I was with Malcolm Jenkins on my team, and last year I was just man, this guy's doing so much, and it's nobody's ever shining a light on all the things that guys are doing, because I feel because if they start to do that, it would be us being more human. It would break down that barrier that because we're athletes that we're only on this side of the world, and we only can be on this side of the fence, we only can live on the hill, we can't be a part of the world. And I think that's an issue that a lot of athletes have too, because once you take yourself out the world, then it's hard to live by yourself when you're not the player anymore that you once were. And I think, if the media would do a better job of listening and following guys and seeing that, I think it would just be crazy. It just because they'll just see even with like police brutality, and there's guys who's doing ride-alongs with the cops, finding out better ways to connect the community to the police. There's guys doing stuff with food garden and detention centers. There's so much people are doing that a lot of people just don't know, because those aren't the things that fans want to be engaged with. Fans don't want to be engaged with athletes that are doing that. They want to see their athlete dunk the ball. They want to see Marshawn Lynch run through 3 people and score a touchdown. They don't really want to be connected to that side of them. Politics and sports don't really mix with some people.
So on this same sort of subject, I think, again, the media, but I think the public more generally like to talk about outspoken Black players like yourself, like Colin Kaepernick, or even somebody like Odell Beckham as distractions.
Yeah.
Is that a media creation, or is it at all valid? Going back to what you were saying about what coaches think of you if you're more than the guy in the helmet.
I think so. I think a lot of teams or people, they say you're outspoken, but I think you're not really outspoken. You're really just saying what needs to be said. Like, it's like they put like a stigma on it if you have a voice or you have that opinion. And it's like, it's hard though, because if you're a Black athlete and you have a voice and you start to say stuff, it's like as soon as you start to say something, everybody's going to start criticizing you. You're going to be in that arena and they have access to you, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, every single thing. Somebody's going to find a way to get to you and criticize you. And you have to be able to withstand that. So it's like if you are going to be able to have a voice, you're going to have to be able to deal with the criticism too. And I think a lot of teams and a lot of players are scared of the criticism. They're scared of the criticism, what comes with having a voice, what comes along with that. It's better to stay in line. That way you have the support of the organization, you have the support of Nike, you have the support of everybody. But when you start to speak out, you won't have the same support. And back in 2016, or when we started doing everything with the knee and we started sitting down, we started doing different things. How many sponsors guys lost? Guys lost sponsors. I lost sponsors to my foundation, people that I thought they were like, all in it. Like, it was all in it till I was talking about philanthropy. But as soon as I started talking about activism and things that happen to communities that don't look like them, it became a big issue. It's like, whoa. We said we serve food, but we didn't say we want to deal with the police brutality or this or that. Like, that line's too far for us to go past. Like, we're going to lose our fan base, we're going to lose our customers. And so that happens a lot.
So in 2017, we had John Carlos here, and in prior years, we've had Tommy Smith and Harry Edwards. I know that you and Carlos are friends. How has he guided or inspired the work that you're doing?
I think the great thing about John is that, like, it'd be times where you just be chilling and you just be like, dang, and then your phone will ring and it'll be John. And you're on the phone with John, you're going to be for 30 minutes at least 30 to an hour.
Yes.
So he going to go through a whole, we're going to tell you everything you need to know. And, hey, young boy, yeah. So it's like, but it's good, though, to have people like John, because it's like, the thing about John that I respect, and like everybody, like, fantasizes about that moment when he had the fist up. But for me, the biggest thing that I respect about John is how he dealt with all the adversity that came afterward, with his wife, his family, everything that came along with that. I think that's the true testament of his character. A lot of people, they don't want to connect with that side of it, the side that when you do step out, you do something, the trauma that comes along with that to your psyche. And I think John dealt with a lot of that, and he still is able to connect with people and still be vulnerable and still be like this message and this shining beacon of hope. And I think that's the greatest thing I love about John, is just his will to just keep going, and his connection. And when you talk to him, that aura around him, you're looking at greatness when you talk to John, or when you talk to him over the phone. You just know that, like, whatever he's saying it from a kind place, and he's looking out for you in like a big brother way. And I think that's what I love about John.
So I'm going to save some of these for people in the audience. So I didn't mention it was in your bio, but in the past you have donated all of your endorsement money to charity. Can you talk about what led you to make that decision, and I think in particular why that seems to the public to be such a unique thing to do, and is it?
I don't think
are
it's
there other guys who are doing that? And
I think a lot of guys. Yeah, I think a lot of guys are doing that. They just do it in their own way. I think a lot of times, people pay attention to it, and I think, one of my teammates, Cliff Averill, he does that. My brother was doing it. It's like different guys were doing different things, and for me, it was just about, like, how can we like interact with the fans, interact with businesses, and bring people into the communities that don't really have that connection to the community. And as when I was in Seattle, that was always the message, like, yeah, we're the Seattle Seahawks, but we don't really interact with people in Seattle. Nobody in the communities, if you look at communities of color, whether it was Native Americans, whether it was the Hispanic community or the Black community, none of them ever seen Seahawks. And so it was like, that's what that was about. It was about bringing those people into the arenas, those people into the stadiums, those people into the facility, and bringing the team and taking down the team's barrier, not trying to build walls, but trying to build bridges to the communities that we affect and the communities that are part of us. And I think that was what the main thing was. And I think we did a good job of that when we were in Seattle. We was able to really connect with the city and really connect with people all over the state. And I think that was really a unique situation.
So effective altruism is a hot button topic at the moment. As somebody who is firmly entrenched in philanthropy and giving at multiple levels, how do you go about making sure that you're allocating resources where you think they'll be most helpful?
Me and my wife, I think we both just kind of like trying to like find things that are passionate to us and things that we can be really connected to. It's like when you start to give, it's like everybody wants something. So it's like, what are you connected to, and how does it touch your heart? Does it touch you spiritually? Does it make you feel like a part of it? And it's like you always want to help, but it's like for us, we kind of built our foundation around the things that we see are important, and we try to give to that first. Like we try to do something locally, we try to do something nationally, and then try to do something globally. Trying to connect on all three levels of different people. And I think connecting with Africa for me is a big thing, because it's the part of the culture that is not really connected with. The thing that we lost is the culture. Not having that culture is a big issue, and the searching for that is something that I really want to do. So I connect with Africa and do stuff in Africa with kids and find ways to bridge that gap. And then we just try to find ways to constantly push the agenda of what we see that is important, whether it's the school, the prison pipeline, work with kids in detention centers, just keep going out and keep opening doors. So at the end of the day, is how does it touch you spiritually for me and my wife? And I think that's the thing that really guides us on things. And it's like we had to build a great team of people who were passionate about it, because we were building a team with people who are just like us. They're passionate about situations, they're passionate about their communities, and they're taking risks. They're leaving their teaching jobs to help us build curriculums for schools. And so it's like, it's important that the people that we have around us they're risk takers, and they believe, and they have a certain amount of courage to go out and change the world.
I don't think this is actually an accurate question, but two things that people might not immediately associate you with are STEM and food justice. How did those become focuses of yours, and why are they important?
I think the word is not, is it food apartheid now? It's not food desert, food apartheid. That's what it is. Yeah, I learned that a couple weeks ago.
Okay, thank you.
No, but for us, it was we were in Hawaii, and I was going to this thing with the state, and we were talking about food and nutrition, and we're trying to figure out how do we, help the people in the inner city have a better access to nutrition and better food. And there was a lot of people in the community that were like, oh, we got to do this and that. Oh, it would take like 7 years. And I was just like, what, 7 years? Like, some of these kids are going to be adults. They're going to have babies by then. So it's like, so we wanted to find a way to like get into that. And I think my introduction to food justice, growing up in Texas, that was something that we lived in that we didn't really realize that we were living in, the access to the fresh foods and all that kind of stuff, because we lived in the suburbs, but the inner city suburbs, and we had like one grocery store, HEB. We didn't have a lot of farms, we didn't have a lot of fresh food. So learning about the food desert, growing up, and realizing back then that I was living in one. And then now I'm like, and when I got older, I'm like, okay, how can we do this? And we just started talking to a lot of different people who were doing a lot of work in it. And that's one of the things I feel like that's one of the hardest things too, is like when you want to be a part of something and you think and you just got to say, I don't know. And it's like to go learn and just listen from other people who are really doing the work in the communities. And I think that's important to, doing a lot of the work that we're trying to do. And when we got into the food justice thing, and we're looking at all the different places that don't have food, all the people that don't have gardens, and we just were like, how can we do that? So we started building gardens in different communities all over the city in Seattle, and detention centers. Just started building gardens in Hawaii, and just started giving people access to fresh nutrition, and started having camps. And that's really how we got introduced to it, was at that state level when we saw how they were talking about it. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm one of those kids that you were talking about. And now that I have the position and the platform, I want to go out and help make the change and transition faster.
See, I thought it was going to be about the farm.
Yeah.
I thought that was going to be the connection. So anyway, at the end of the book, you talk about an organization you're working with called Athletes for Impact. Can you tell us about that and what the plans are for that organization for the future?
I think the Athletes for Impact is a really cool group of people because it's like all these different athletes from all over different sports. You know, you got fencers, you got swimmers, you got skateboarders, you got Olympians. You just got all kinds of different people who are like, you know, fearless in their sport, but then also they're fearless in the things that they believe in, and they're fearless in, you know, standing in front of everybody and facing the crowd and just saying exactly what they believe in. And for me, it's like, dang, this group of people are just amazing. And I think Athletes for Impact is about how do we reach young children. I think the whole thing is about we don't want to get to a place where the young people don't have a, you know, they don't have a agenda or they don't have a focus or they don't have a voice. Because a lot of times I feel like in sports, the reason why you don't have a voice is because you don't have nobody teaching you how to have a voice. You don't have anybody to teach you how to articulate your message or articulate your pain, articulate your trauma. And I think that's what Athletes for Impact is. It's about helping young kids articulate their messages and doing big campaigns with other athletes and grouping athletes together, because athletes are so segregated. Like the NBA players stay with the NBA players and the professional soccer players stay over there. So it's like bringing everybody together and coming together and being like, your problem is my problem. And I think that's like another way of having intersectionality is with the Athletes for Impact. And, you know, we just have great leadership and we focused on the community and young people and doing things and bailout reforms, just doing a lot of different things. We're doing so many different things because we have so many different people that are a part of it.
And what would you say is the most effective way for not just non-professional athletes, but I would say people generally? I think one of the things that I hear students talking about on college campuses, right, is how to sort of mobilize and get behind something and see that cause all the way through. And in particular, when they are not professional athletes, they're not people with recognizable faces or names or a team behind them, and they don't necessarily feel like they can do something and have the kind of impact that they would expect a Michael Bennett to be able to have. So what would you say to them?
I would just say never stop. I think you thinking that your one small part doesn't play the whole thing of everything, the big part in it is not true. I think you having your voice and saying what you're saying and believing in is the most important thing. I think a lot of times we don't want to be the people who look back in history and being like, oh, we didn't say anything and those things happened. The people who were part of Jim Crow that didn't say anything. The people who were part of the Holocaust that look back and was like, I didn't act on that, or I didn't act on this, I didn't act on that. So it's about not being reactive, but being proactive. And whatever your voice is and whatever your message is, just share it with the world and just don't be scared of don't be fearful of that. Don't be fearful of the criticism. Don't be fearful of what somebody is going to do to you at your job. You're going to lose your job. Just have a voice and just live on what you want to believe in. Because at the end of the day, if you look at a lot of great people, a lot of things they always talk about in their diary before they die is regrets. It's like you don't want to be somebody who lives with regrets. And I think when you go back and you don't have that voice that you wanted to have on, or you're looking at, you know, this girl's something's about to go down with her, and you just like, oh, I'm just going to walk this way. You're going to live with regrets if you find out that something happened to them, or you see, you know, you just see a lot of different things happening. You don't want to not live with the respect that you know that you deserve. And if you really believe in, you trust who you are and you have confidence in everything that you believe in, don't be fearful of stepping on that ledge. I mean, I remember just a couple of weeks ago, I was in New Zealand, and I'm always scared of heights. I swear, I'm always scared of heights. And then it was somebody like, oh, that's up, man. What was that? Yeah. And I was in New Zealand with my daughter, and I'm so scared of heights. I'm like, I'm a grown man. But then my daughter, my 8-year-old daughter, she just went and just let it go. And I was thinking in my head, I'm like, that's what not being fearless. I mean, that's what fearlessness is. It's like just to let go and believe in who you are. So she had me. I went from looking down like I'm not going to riding upside down backwards, you know. So it's like, don't be scared to like just go out there and don't be scared of what you think that might happen, instead of just living in that moment and just existing and having that power of now.
Okay, I want to make sure we have enough time for questions because we always don't. So, so what I would like to do right now is open it up for questions. And I think my trusty associate here, Shantala, will take the microphone so that we can capture it for posterity.
All right. Is it on? Okay. Thank you for your time. My question is related to food apartheid and the willingness of two sectors specifically within our specific community of Africans in the Americas. Can we, at some point, it could be offline, whatever, all my information is here. If we have an organized group of farmers and an organized group of people with land on which to farm, can you put 2 or 3 of our capable people to speak before, let's say, the Boulay guardsmen, professional athletes in the States? Give a half an hour, full explanation. The direct request is going to be coming to support the financing of a farm that will support regionally our community. That's my direct question.
Yeah, that's a very detailed question. Let me process that. What kind of? Yeah, no, I think that's possible. I think there's always guys looking in, and right now with what's happening in sports and raising all this money, there's definitely a place for that where they're trying to find out ways to really reach the community. I think if you got some information, I'd love to pass it on to some of the guys who are doing some of that stuff, and then we can see if we can make it happen.
Hi, how are you? I have a question, well, your thoughts on the current state of the NCAA. My professor said that the NCAA is basically a protest away from shutting down. What do you think of that as it pertains to revenue generating sports and the effects it has, well, the leadership has on Black college athletes and so on and so forth?
I think they should shut it down, honestly, because there has to be some kind of system where the athlete gets paid for in some type of way, whether it's in a 401k or something where athletes get paid for something in the future. Maybe it's not now that they get the money, but they put it away. But as much money as the athlete brings to the university and the fact that we consider amateurs and the amount of money that the coaches are getting paid, these college coaches are getting paid $10 to $12 million a year, the staff $1 million. The jersey sales are outrageous. The games are 80,000 plus, and you tell me that some kids can't eat on campus? That doesn't make any sense. So I feel like it is time for the athletes to take over and really, have that agenda. But I think the thing about it is that guys are fearful of that they're not going to have that NFL. They're not going to have that opportunity. And it's just at some point, are they going to be about the whole? And I think it just takes one great college athlete or one great player who just steps up and says, this isn't right. And I think there's going to be somebody in this generation that does that because, when John Carlos and Muhammad Ali and Jim Brown, they spawned a lot of young people to have voices, and I think that drought happened for a while, but now there's a lot of athletes now who are going to spawn young athletes to have voices, and I think that's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you. Is this on? Okay. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Asantua Nkrumah Toure, and I live and organize here in Philadelphia. I want to say thank you very much, brother, for coming to UPenn. I think a lot about social justice and politics, and more recently I was thinking about social justice and football as pertains to Michael Sam, who came out a few years ago, and this year being the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Rebellion, which was a rebellion by queer folks against police brutality. But now here we have Michael Sam, and he's still not playing. So I guess my question is, for among your colleagues in sports, do you all check in on him, or do you talk about him, or see how he's doing?
The crazy thing is
whatever?
that I literally just, I was with my brother and the other day, and we were reading this story. Michael Sam just had a story just come out, and I think if you look at it, I feel like it was, the world wanted him to do something, and he came out and he said what he was going to say, but the world wasn't there to support him. So I don't think it was just that football. I think it was the world. If you look at his story and read what he was saying, it was like everybody that he thought that had his back didn't have his back. The people that thought that would give him a job. So I think it's really not the players. it was really what he did for society and what he was saying and what he was doing. I think it was more for everybody to have that connection with him. And I didn't know that, reading that story, how low that he went, as far as like, dealing with drugs, dealing with depression. I didn't really understand the amount of, pressure that he was dealing with. And I think now that having that story, him being vulnerable and being able to share that, I think he's going to be able to have outreach, because if you look at the story, he said he wasn't ready for outreach. He wanted to be alone because he had been in the camera so much that he just felt like he was alone. And I think he lost so many family members. I think now is like a good time to reach out to him now, because I feel like he's finally getting his mental state back. So, but before, nobody really knew what happened to him. We just know he disappeared and stopped playing.
Thank you again for your time. But just going back to your comment about articulation of trauma, and in your book you mentioned half God, half property, right? And so with James Byrd's lynching so close to where you were growing up, how often are you able to really kind of articulate that to others within either your philanthropy network, your locker room, about how that kind of helped you draw like a middle line very early in your life?
I mean, I think all the time. I've dealt with my own adversity in life, whether it's with the police or the judicial system or whatever, criticism. So I understand that, like, there's a lot of things happening, and with James Byrd and looking back and that kind of like making me understand the line that was drawn in the sand. I feel like the most important thing from that is that no matter what, I stay true to what I believe in, because I feel like once I start to alter that and forget people who lost their lives, or people who did so much for now, and not to be in this platform and forget their struggles or forget their journey, I think it would just be an injustice to the people around me. It'd be an injustice to me. It'd be an injustice to society to be fearful of having that voice. And I think, like you said, like those traumas and seeing those traumas are the things that help shape your views. And I think one of those things is always shaping my views. But the thing I said the most is that when I get into the room with the people, whether it's with somebody I don't alter, I say exactly what I mean and mean what I say. It's like, this is who I am and this is what I believe in. I'm Black, this is what I think, and this is why I think it. And I think if you can continuously stay on that and feel like you're not changing for society, then I think you're on the right path.
So I don't know if you saw, but Russell Westbrook had an incident where basically he was being attacked by fans and he essentially called them out for that. And so it seems like a lot of fans don't really view players as people, but more like entertainment. So my question is, what steps can leagues take to kind of protect the players and make sure that they're safe on the field?
I think one thing the fans need to do is stop playing fantasy sports. I think fantasy sports is what ruins your whole ideology of the player, because all of a sudden you start playing fantasy sports and you start seeing these people as fantasy. You don't see them in reality. You don't see them having families. You don't see all that stuff. So they think when they're in the stadium they could touch them. They think that like he's not real. Like, yeah, if you touch a lion, the lion gonna bite. So it's like at the end of the day, like, you can't come into somebody else's job and you can't go to somebody else's job and hit them on the back of the head or slap them on the butt and then that'll be okay. You can't do that. You can't walk in the Hooters and be like, hey, good job, boom. Yeah, that's sexual harassment. So it's like you going to jail. Like, so for Russell, they have to it's on the organizations and the leagues to make the fans realize that these are people and that they're not something to play with. They're you playing in the game. Everything about your life when you're playing in the game is tied up into what's happening around you. Like, people put so much work in, and when they be in the game and they losing, it just hurts them. And I think sometimes the fans don't realize that they trying to be funny and make all them jokes, and then Russell Westbrook all in their ass and they mad.
Hi. So my question was, so you obviously have gotten to a point in your career, to a point of success, where you've been able to use your platform enough to speak up for issues like income inequality, police brutality, and other issues for other people who don't have the same platform as you. How do you deal with other athletes, whether it be your teammates or other peers that you have in the NFL or other leagues who believe that they're above the issues or the system because of their position and their success?
I think a lot of times with that is you gotta let people grow. I think sometimes when you're forceful and you want to push your agenda on them and your fellow teammates, sometimes it just pushes them back. I think it's that one-on-one time with them, and you sit there and you kind of explain to them and do that. I think sometimes, you thinking that you're on the right, you think you're on the left side, but you're really just becoming a right winger because you're so much trying to get this person to believe what you believe in that you almost pushing it too far and you pushing them too far. I think it's about, connecting with the person, taking them around communities and showing them. That's what I do. I used to take young players to the juvenile detention center and let them, sit with kids in prison, let them sit so then they could change and see how their voices can be amplified. And I think that's important for you to do, is not to, like I said, you don't want to build no wall. You want to build those bridges with your teammates. And that's hard to do sometimes because you could be so passionate about something that you could become ignorant about it. You know what I'm saying? It's about not being abrasive, but being connected with them and showing them. And I think that's the thing you got to learn too as a leader. It's not always about, sometimes it's about, hey, let's be creative. Let's find a way to collaborate. Let's find, what are you passionate about? And then find out what they're passionate about and open them doors. I think that's what what I try to do with a lot of the players.
So you mentioned different teams having different cultures when it comes to speaking out about topics. So what team that you've been a part of has been most rigid in their not wanting players to speak out, or just a team in the league in general that you've heard about?
I'm not sure which one is the most. I always kind of was on the outside anyway, so it was always feel like that. But a team that I felt like that was super connected, that had the most voice, I think Seattle Seahawks. When I was with Seattle Seahawks, we had the biggest voice, and I think it was because each player was connected with each other and we trusted each other. And I think we always talked about real issues that were happening around us. And I think those guys, and I think because we were so passionate about what we believed in, we demanded from the organization to have the same amount of intensity and passion about what we believed in. And so everything started to be a trickle-down effect. We started to have real conversations about things that were happening in the world. Coach Carroll would always start the day off with a world issue, and then we would have a conversation about it. Then we would go on about football, because he knew that, seeing what happened in the streets in Ferguson, or seeing what happened with Sandra Bland, or seeing those things were on our mind. We were talking about them. And so I think for Coach Carroll would already, go and start to ask those questions. So how do you guys feel about it? And then we would talk about it. And I think that's why we had such a big voice. And I think that's why we're one of the most unique teams in the history of sports, because we were all doing things in our community, and we were all talking about things, and we were all connected to where we were from.
With the upcoming CBA in 2020, between the NFLPA and the owners, do you think that the issues of social justice and racial justice and expression around that on the field is going to be discussed?
I think it's already been discussed. I think I know people are going to get mad about this, but I think Colin Kaepernick and Malcolm Jenkins doing the Players Coalition and them getting paid for what they're doing, that was kind of their way of saying, okay, shh, be quiet now. We already kind of compensated you for it. So I think there's this way of where I think it's still going to be an issue, because Richard Sherman is ahead of it all, and because Richard Sherman is Richard Sherman, that he's going to make sure that, I was just talking to him the other day when he was going to the players' meetings, and he was telling me, I was like, hey, you better be yourself. He's like, I'm going to be me. So it's it's good when people like Richard Sherman are in the control of what's happening. But I do think there is a part of everybody, what's next? Okay, we got compensation, we got this. What's the next steps to really building a movement, or what's really the next step to building an organization or organizing around athletes? What's the big next step in the NFL to doing that? And I think them taking the money kind of halted that a little bit, because guys are like, oh, I don't know where to go. Am I taking a knee? Am I sitting down? Is it over? So I think there's a lot of that going on, and I think there needs to be some leadership as far as saying this is what we're going to do and this is why we're going to do it. Just waiting for somebody to step up and do that. Yeah, it could be me.
Michael, you spoke about it in your book. You learned more from your brother as a transition being in the NFL than any coach could ever teach you. Of course, the NFL draft is this weekend. I almost kind of feel bad for players, because it felt like you almost had an upper hand in going into the league. So what type of advice, or I would say more so guidance, that if some rookies will come up to you and say, hey, how do I make this transition with all the propaganda they're going to hear from coaches, media, and even some teammates alike?
The combine. Oof. Speaking of the draft and combine, at first when I was in the book, I talked about, and this was before I went to Africa. It was I was talking about how it felt like a slave problem, getting your body pulled and getting weighed and all these different things, and I didn't really understand. Like, I had this thought, and I was like, this is what I believe. But then when I went to Africa, and I kind of like really went to Goree Island, and I saw like what it was, I was like, this is exactly what it's the same. Wayne, Pickett, Ken, teeth. He's got the right teeth. He got calf, knee. Oh, can't put him in that side. So it was like a lot of that, and I just now I look back and I feel bad for a lot of athletes because they don't really understand what's happening in them around them. And I think now what the advice I give athletes now is if you don't attain anything from the NFL, obtain economic freedom. So save your money. I hate to see like at the end of it all, like people, young players or old players, they put all this work in, and then when it's time for them to leave the game, they have nothing to leave with. You know, they don't own nothing. They're not a part of nothing. They don't have no identity. They don't have no family. They lost everything, and it's like now they go into the world like they started. They like basically get a newborn, and it's like that's why I tell rookies: save your money, man, and just continue to believe in yourself and educate yourself with the right people around you, and find out what the teams have to give you. I think a lot of times we go in, the first thing we look for is our jersey number, but I think the first thing you need to do when you walk into the locker room is look for the person who's in charge of player engagement. And I was lucky because I had one of the best guys ever to be in the NFL, this guy named Maurice Kelly. He's like the ultimate person when it comes to player engagement. And I think you got to find people like that who can really give you the guidance of what you need to be successful in the NFL.
Hi, so my question was more towards you were talking about Seattle and the impact that Seattle as a team had in the community. With the recent changes that the team has had with people leaving and everything being mixed up, how would you say
It's not the same.
How would you say teams can continue that, or if people are changing and going to different places, bringing their vision and their voice to those teams that they changed to?
I think you change the city, but then you got to change the organization. And I think if you look at, I just met with the Seattle Seahawks because I do my charity event there, and I was going off on the Seahawks about there was like a room full of people in here. They were all white too, and I was like, first of all, there's too many white people in here. We're talking about communities, and it was like, oh no, and then so, and so we were talking, and we were like, and I was telling them, I was like, no offense to the people who work here, but we need somebody that's actually been in the community that, you know, that's a part of the community that understands what's happening, you know, whether it's Native American. We can't talk about Native American issues if Native Americans don't have a representation. So it's like, and so now, like, you talk about impact, and I just met with the Seattle Seahawks last week, and it's like now they have a person who's been in the community for 20 years in King County, working in different areas. Now he's the head of community relations. So it's about, you know, changing the organization and changing them and demanding that they bring somebody in. And sometimes it doesn't happen in a day, it might happen in a year, but we've made that transition. So I think as far as the community, they're still reaching. The players change, but I think their total goal of what they do in the community is really changing. And I think I even pushed that with the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think you have to continuously push that on them and make them uncomfortable. And it's like, you know, we can't talk about women of color if there's no women of color up there. We're talking about how to help them change or do stuff, and we don't have representation. So we've got to constantly push that and make sure that the teams understand that.
Hi, Michael. Matthew Donovan, longtime Boston sports fan. I just had a question for you. You're a great player on the field. You'll probably lead us to another Super Bowl. But I had a more important question.
Well, you're gonna be
I had
good.
a more important question. What difference are you going to make in the locker room and in the community of Boston? And how have you done so with other teams, should I say?
I think the thing about is what I said from the beginning. It's about listening. It's about not coming into the community having this idea of what you think can be changed. It's about going into communities, meeting with people, going to meet with people who are doing work, and talking to the players in the locker room. You don't want to come in and abruptly try to change everything, because all that's going to do is butt heads and have everybody in the organization being like, why is this guy here? It's about communicating with them and find out what they've been doing, and don't try to recreate the wheel if they're already doing programs, but also going into the inner cities, going into different areas and finding out. And I think that's the thing that what I want to do when I get to Seattle. I did that in Philly. I do that in every single team, is being connected and finding the people who are really doing the work in the city.
Hey, Michael. My name's Messiah. I'm a longtime Giants fan, so if you want to rest during that game, you know, we kind of need those wins.
Yeah, I do. I traded Odell Beckham. I'm like,
but my question is, Kyle Korver recently had a little thing where he was speaking out about white privilege in the NBA. And in regards to like the NFL, I know that, you know, you have Richard Sherman, Kaepernick, and Jenkins recently speaking out, but there's not really white people speaking out as much in the NFL to the issues that
Yeah,
people of color are facing. So I wanted to know if you could speak to that.
I don't know if you read my book, but we talked about that in the book. But in the book I was talking about that, I was talking about like, here are these quarterbacks, the greatest quarterbacks. They're so connected to their receivers when they come to the game, but when it comes to connecting to their communities, they lack that connection. And I think until somebody who's able to come out, if you look at Baker Mayfield, like, he's a quarterback. When he says something, it's like he's talking about this coach who's been in the league for 20 years, but when he says something, he's not being cocky. He's not being cocky. He's just being him. And I think if he has that same cockiness and he's just being him, then he should be able to also connect with the city like that. And I think it's also the players too. A lot of times we look at the white players and we demand that they throw us the ball, but we don't demand the same activity off the field. So it's also on the black player to do the same thing. It's like you want your teammate to have a voice, then you got to show them how to have a voice. You got to show them what the things look like in their community. You got to be able to not come from like this place where you got so much anger, but this place of where you can show them, like, this is why you need to speak to him, Brady, because this are happening. This is why this is happening. And I can take you there and let you meet the people. Then that kind of changes their perspective. And I think that's what the players need to do to the quarterback, is to demand that they be connected to their cities and demand that they be connected, not philanthropy, but activism and things that are happening around them.
Hi, thanks for coming. I wanted to go back to the NCAA question. So we recently saw an act of resistance. I think it was University of Missouri.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not sure exactly where it was.
That was Missouri.
Where the football players had grievances because there were racial incidents going on on campus. And so they sent a letter to the dean saying, these are our grievances, please address them. The dean didn't do that, so they said, okay, we're not playing. And they didn't. And then immediately they fired the dean.
Yeah.
So then this ties in also to your, John Carlos, what you said about him too, in terms of like the fallout from that act of resistance. And so we saw, like, after that happened, they continued to play football, but we saw lawmakers in that state say, hey, if this ever happens again, we're going to pull your scholarships, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. So it's like a blatant act of retaliation in case this ever happens again. So I guess my question is, like, I don't know, what are your thoughts on how we, so after that act of resistance, how we manage that fallout, what do we do after that in terms of, like, I guess I'll leave it there.
I think you answered your own question. But no, I do think it's like when they took that act of resistance, it should almost been like the ice bucket challenge. It's like we all should have been saying we wouldn't play, we all wouldn't do that, because it's like I said, it's about the intersectionality. It's about if Missouri feels like they're having injustice, then we all should be not playing. And I think and to that level, we could think as one whole. And the reality, in the NFL, it's only like 2,000 players. So it's not really that many people coming together and having one agenda. So it's like we got to be able to help them and connect with them and not just let one person have the burden of having that on their life. I think a lot of times before, if you look at the people who were the leaders of the group, they had so much burden. If you look at their history, you look at the disconnect from their families, you look at all the traumas that happened to them because they took those steps out. It's like we need to be able to group up with people and give them the support that they need. So it's all about, other people coming to support. Maybe somebody at that time should have been from the St. Louis Rams. Like, no, that's not okay. So it takes a lot more people to step out and just, people who are not connected but have a higher place in the hierarchy and being able to say, hey, no, that's not right. And then the next person is just like, we just got to catch on. And that should be the challenge, instead of the hot sauce challenge.
So just to clarify, because I think that there are a lot of us who don't necessarily know what kinds of things professional players in particular can do without sort of immediate concern about retribution, right? Because I know, depending on there are issues around contracts, but what are there about team and league rules and norms that make it easier or more difficult to do the kinds of things that you're talking about?
Well, I don't know the exact policy of what they. I really think, like I said, I don't know the exact policy, but I think that it's just about people having that connection together, because at the end of the day, we have the power. Like, the players have the power. It's just about how many players are willing to take that step out there, how many players are willing to be connected. even like taking a knee, it slowly was like one person, two people, three people. Then after it became, teams start to do it, then they start to address it. It's that when we become connected together that things start to, get addressed. And I think that's what we have to do is to constantly, share the message and keep building our camaraderie together and being able to lean on each other. And that's what I think that's how we really, have that step to changing the NFL. It's just about, we do it for contracts, we do it for other things. It's just about connecting on those issues too.
What's up? I'd like to start off with the Go Birds.
I don't play for the Philadelphia Eagles.
I know, but still, I want to
They're
thank
losers,
you
man. Patriots are winners. Go ahead.
I just want to thank you for what you did for the city during the time you were here, and not only as a player, but also how you realized you had such a platform, and you decided to actually turn that into activism. And so I just want to talk about. I want to hear your thoughts on criminal justice in Philadelphia during your time here, because you were partnered with Michael Jenkins around that time too. So I just want to hear your thoughts on.
I think we were just really focusing on bail reform. We were just trying to, get all the, so-called offenders who couldn't make bail, and that's what we were focusing on is how do we, do that, and we just was around that. And also the thing that we were focusing on too, not the criminal justice system, we also focusing on what happens when the people get back. So it was about putting jobs and things together in line for people that have the opportunity when they get out of the prison or they get out of jail, they have jobs and things in line. So that's what we were focusing on. We were focusing on not having them going back and focusing on, giving them opportunities. And that's what we were really focusing on, me and Malcolm.
Michael, thank you for coming. You came to the right place. This is one of the richest spots in the United States. Notice, important sports business,
Yeah.
it's a very rich business. Philadelphia, that you came to talk in, is one of the poorest cities in the country. Right? And I read somewhere that last year, the Forbes people, put out that magazine. They said that there were 560 billionaires in the U.S. They came out in January of this year and said there are 604. So the billionaires are doing very well. I'm wondering if you don't think that sports business has a lot to do with capitalism.
It does.
And the way the wealth of the country and of the people goes straight to the wealthy people already. The division is enormous and getting worse. Don't you think it has something to do with capitalism?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Obviously, capitalism is the main objective in sports is for them to make money, and I think how do the teams and people who are above have the humanity to be connected to their cities and their communities in a way that not just socially but economically, and I think there's not a lot of organizations who are willing to do that, and I think what we were talking about and what we were trying to do in Seattle was make the city and make the team have justice in that area. If Microsoft is, if they're a big sponsor, then why don't they do, internships with the kids in the community? So giving those kids the opportunities and fairness. I think, to me, that's what equality is about. We all lining up at the same line and racing at the end. Whoever wins, wins, and no obstacles, just fairness on a 100-yard dash and running. And I think the organizations have to do that too. They have to be able to be fair and say, we're making this much money, and the fans have to demand it, because capitalism also has to do with the consumer. The consumer is who contributes to the capital of the business, and the fans aren't willing to change their agenda. They're more focused on the jersey sales, and they're more focused on the players that they like, the Nike sales and everything. So we all have a place in that. We all have a voice in that. If we all decide not to watch the NFL, there won't be any more NFL on TV. So we also have to demand the same thing from the fans that we're demanding from the organizations.
Okay, hi, Michael. I just wanted to ask you to give me some more information regarding your foundation.
You want me to give you the whole thing?
Yes, I do.
It says a lot. I think right now we're focusing on, we have two sides of our foundation that we're really focusing on at this point. We're focusing on food apartheid and food justice and STEM in one area. The next part, we're focusing on social issues. So building curriculums for teachers to be able to, really have the commitment from the schools and also have, the right information to be able to talk to the kids. Because a lot of the times the teachers aren't equipped to talk about social issues, and we're expecting the teachers to go into the classroom and talk about Black Lives Matter and things that happen on the border, and they just don't have the right information. So we're trying to build a curriculum where teachers have the right information to be able to teach to their kids, to be able to share the messages with their kids, and to teach other kids about other people's history. It's important that, a white kid knows about Black history. It's important that a Black kid knows about Asian history. It's important that the Asian history know about Hispanic history, because then it contributes to the value of a person's place in society. And I think that's important. And that's why we're focusing on the curriculums for both. So we have the curriculum for social issues, and we have the curriculum for food. So not just, teaching the kids how to eat, but then teaching them how to farm, and then teaching them how to shop, and teaching them how to eat, and teaching them about how to grow their own food. And my wife is really particular on not going into communities and changing the cultural part of the aspect of how to eat. Like if they eat culturally away, there's ways of finding how to make what they eat cultural and balance that out. And so we're really focusing on those two things that are our foundation. So while doing the social issue things, we're doing the women's summits and different summits around the United States. We bring in kids and teaching them about how to be the teachers of their society and be the leaders while also working with teachers. You're welcome. It's a lot, but yeah.
Hello. Yes. So I was, hello, hi, Michael. Thank you for being here. And thank you for your book. I work in a school, and I'm not a teacher yet, want to be. But I work in a school, and one of my students saw me reading the book, and he was like, "What is that?" And he doesn't read books much, and I try to push him to a lot. I work with him really closely, but I was like, "Just read the foreword." And I got him to read the foreword, and he was like, "This is great." He eventually stole the book from me, so it took me a while to finish. But it made me really happy that it was something that engaged him so much that he wanted to finish the whole book and read it. But he's very interested in sports and whatnot, and just going off of what you said. How you said that there was how you were like, it's a bad idea if young students of color or young children of color or young children at all are kind of making athletes their superheroes. And so I was wondering what advice that you would give him or to students to who to look up to as a mentor. How do I support him in his dreams, but also lead or I guess guide him into some sort of future where he feels like he can do anything that he needs to do, or and not just rely on sports. And also, what is another book I could recommend to him?
This is a book called Dear Black Boy. Now my brother just wrote a book called Dear Black Boy, and basically the book is about it's a letter to black boys and to teach them that they don't have to run and jump to have success. And the book is focusing on their brain and is focusing on their creativity. And I think for me, that's one of the things that I really wanted to do in the book. I didn't really want to do a book just about, we won this Super Bowl, played 39, I got this sack, and I own this. I was really focusing on how to empower young people and empower them in creative voice. And I think that's what, I guess that is kind of like what we want to be as superheroes, is giving people the power to be their own superhero and share their own message. And I think with him, I would just push him to really believe in himself and have the confidence to really step out. If it's not speaking up, it's about, going out and doing things that he's not used to doing. Reading may be one of them. You already broke down one barrier. And so it's like, finding different people that he might like to read about. It doesn't have to be an athlete. It could be about other great inventors, and people that are doing great things. So just find out what he likes, and then just keep trying to find people to push towards him. I think for me, I always try to find different people to look up to and things. But also, I think too, when he finds somebody that he considers a mentor, is to do the whole research about them. So when you pick somebody as a research and you're researching them, and I always tell kids like, oh, why you see me as your superhero? Why you see me as your mentor? You look up to me. They'll be like, oh, if they say, oh, because you get sacks, I say, well, I'll let you down. Because if that's the only thing you know about a person is their success on the field, then they really can't be the person that you look up to because you don't know the well-roundedness of them. So make sure that when he does pick somebody that he's a mentor of, that he really goes and digs deep into their character, with their values, and what they see as important in life.
Hi again. So you spoke about the combine and it feeling like a slave mentality, as well as the NCAA feeling like a slave mentality. And then even in the NFL, being drafted into a team where all the owners of the teams are white, pretty much, and in other leagues as well, and black people have always been under the ownership of white people who have been able to capitalize on black culture, including in music and sports, specifically, and pretty much all of black culture is dominated by white people. I want to ask your thoughts on, for one, HBCUs. Do you ever think there will be a shift in athletes attending HBCUs, top athletes attending HBCUs, and also black professional sports leagues? So we see Ice Cube recently started a Big 3 league. Do you ever think there will be professional leagues that are owned by black people that will eventually rival or compete with the NFL or other leagues like that?
You want me to be an optimist? No, I don't know. I don't really think I think that like the money streams are so long, and you got to understand, like, when you look at a team, you're not looking at just like the one owner. You're looking at a city, and like the cities, everybody's involved in the success of the team. Like the light people, they make $177,000 when the lights come on. Like, it's a lot of people who are involved in the, in the capitalist side of sports. So I don't know if there'll ever be anybody else let in on that level, because the stadiums, everything that comes with is owned by a whole system of people, and those people are meeting before it happens. When the Super Bowl, there's a reason why teams are fighting for the Super Bowl, cities are fighting for the Super Bowl, because they know the amount of revenue that's going to come to their city. I don't think they're ever going to let anybody else come in with that type of and get into their circle. And I think too, when you talk about blacks in America or Africans in America, there is an underlying trauma of it all. Like, the whole existence of us being here is from a trauma. To be taken and captured and put somewhere else, and losing your culture and not knowing your identity and having to redo everything that you know is hard to do. So it's like you look into the people, whoever we are part of that made it, like you should be in awe of them, because the things that they had to go to for you to be existing is just, I don't know, it's amazing. And I think when you're under that, we've always been able to find some type of happiness while being oppressed. And I think it's just the combine and all that is all connected. It's all the same. It's just a system dressed up in a different way. As they say, a pig dressed in a dress. It's different. It's still a pig, but it's just in a dress. And I think it's always been like that. It's just always been full of trauma. Whether it was Jim Crow, it's like we've never been able to not have the trauma. It's like even after the Reconstruction period, W. Du Bois and everybody was talking about it. It's like we never had the time to really do it. And when we did do it, integration came. It was like we never had a full transition. If you look at everybody, different cultures besides the Native Americans, they never had a transition time either. But the Asians and everybody else, and the Jewish people who came from Eastern Europe to America, they had a transition. They was able to create banks, do all those different things. We were never able to do those things. So I feel like because of that, we can never have that ownership of the leagues that we could possibly have, because we don't have that credit line. Oh, HBCU? Yeah. That's part of integration too. Yeah. No, I feel like that's part of integration too. I feel like HBCUs were everything. The reason why sports changed is because they saw the way that the players were moving. They saw how fast they were. They saw how different the athlete was. Back then they had people playing offensive line and running back. People right now, I feel like all the records before integration shouldn't be up. I think they should be taken down.
Hey, Mike.
What's up, man? What's up, Rick?
I'm an MBA here now at Wharton. Yeah, and I'm a former NFL player.
The funniest thing is we came into the league together, and we stayed together as rookies. That's funny.
We did.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, sort of about your personal evolution from college to the NFL as a quiet observer, to then maybe more of an active observational critic role than to a problem solver, and what the drivers were in those environments that sort of kept, raising yourself to those 3 levels would be my first question. The second question is, what role do you see business playing in solving a lot of the problems that you've indicated and located in your own community throughout the country?
Yeah, I think also too. I think for me, like the growth is. I think it's education. I think being able to take a deep dig into myself, my own journey, coming to terms with the past. I think really dealing with all that and educating myself and going out and not just educating myself from like a book part of it, but then also being in it, like being with a mother who just lost her daughter to police brutality, or being in Haiti and being in where people don't have water, being all these different things, being on Native American reservation. I think that's kind of start to be the evolution of shaping me as an individual and helping me have that voice. And I think business plays a big role into the changing of our communities. I think we as a Black community or Hispanic community, our communities become like people don't want to live into them until people want to live into them, and then it becomes gentrified. And it's like we got to be able. If you look at the things that are happening in Los Angeles right now with the new stadium, people are like, no, we holding on to our houses. You're not buying our houses. No, now you want to buy up in Inglewood. No, we keeping our houses. So it's like we got to be able to get that freedom. If you look at Martin Luther King, the last speech was about economic freedom. Economic freedom is really the freedom that we can have, because if we don't have a seat at the table, then we can't really have a voice. And if you look at of what our industry is in America, our industry has always been is entertainment. That's not tangible. It doesn't have like a tangible type thing to it. It's not like oil. It's not land. It's not fishery. It's not things. All those things are back in our home countries. They're back in Africa. So I believe that the true freedom for African Americans is connecting back with the African ancestry and going back and digging deep into the things that are happening now over there to be the problem solvers and helping bring each other together, bridging that gap, because we're the only displaced people in the whole world right now. We're the only people that don't have a place to go or call home.
You mentioned domestic violence earlier. The league's response to cases of gender-based violence has been pretty underwhelming and seemingly random at times. I was wondering what reforms you would want to see within the NFL, and then also what can individual players do to combat this issue, which obviously is much bigger than within the NFL itself.
I think I've said this before to the NFL. I really think the NFL has to do a better job of getting the wives involved, so we can have a better connection with. We got young people who are in relationships that don't know how to be in relationships. We got people who are fathers that don't know how to be fathers. So we got to start helping them cultivate those relationships in healthy ways. And I think a lot of times, they'll do something with the players over here and they'll teach them how to cultivate a relationship, but it doesn't happen to be where everybody's together and having that dialogue to help them share how to communicate with each other. So I think it's about the NFL being proactive and being the first lead to create things around the family. Like we don't have family things that are created around family and connecting the families with each other. So I think it's about being proactive in that way and really connected on that level.
So I feel that like Malcolm said, I feel like the NFL has ownership definitely has a slave mentality. Not just the owners, but the active quarterbacks in the league have constantly been white, and there's very little leeway for black quarterbacks to excel in this league. Like Cam Newton, like every black quarterback I could think of has to be able to run very well. Has to do more than just throw the ball. Like they have to do more things to show that they're better. And I think the leeway is very, very little. But I'm wondering, how can you? I know you only have the player platform, and Richard Sherman is in with the Players Association, so he has more contact. How do you guys think you'll be able to give black athletes in the NFL more leadway to just opportunity, in particular in the quarterback, to be a quarterback or just in the league in general?
I really think it starts on the other side of the office. I think it's the opportunities in the front office. I think that's where integration is. I think as I talk about in my book, I talk about true integration doesn't happen just on the field. It happens outside of the field. The presidents, the GMs, the different things that are happening, the referees, the scouts. I think and also women too. It should be women involved in this. Different people who are can have the opportunity to create those changes, and then we'll see more people doing things. And I think that's what's been one of the biggest issues is that people always think that the league is integrated on that level because they see black players and black quarterbacks. But how many black GMs do you see? How many black head coaches do you see? That's really where the leeway happens, and I think we need to create a safer place for that to happen too.
This is our last question.
Oh boy, a lot of pressure. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Relatively recently, the NBA's actually had a couple of women become coaches.
Yeah.
I'm just curious to know, being on the inside, is there any movement towards that in the NFL
think-
or any future in that?
I think Bruce Arians is really taking that under his wing. I think he's done. He's got a woman coach, and there's been some times where they bring women coach. I think, but Bruce Arians is the first one, the higher one, I believe. And I think that's really is his thing. And I think if he does it, and the next person does it, I think it'll catch on pretty fast.
Thank you.